Hello everyone, my name is John Claffey, I'm a dairy farmer in County Offaly. I see the end game, as Kate said, I see the end game. She just took exactly what I said to her, what I was going to say. I see the end game coming for CAP for a number of reasons, and I think we need to be prepared for it. And just some basic dry facts on farming for a moment. Normally a speech on subsidies is a really good way to clear a room if a fire alarm fails, so I'll get through this as quick as I can. There are 139,000 farms in the country, employing 258,000 people are employed in total in the agricultural sector in Ireland, about 8 or 9% of total employment. Subsidies that come in the form of CAP and payments amount to 1.2 billion. There's usually a song and dance every year in the papers when those payments are coming. But in real terms, that 1.2 billion was capped in 2002. And since 2002, they were not index-linked, they were not benchmarked. So inflation has been chipping away at them for the last 15, 16 years. There was a process called modulation, which was basically benchmarking in reverse, where everyone's single farm payment was chipped away between 4 and 5% per year for redistribution for various schemes, young farmers, etc. Also factor in the fall in the real value of the euro is about 50% of what it was since it was launched. So in effect, we are dovetailing into a situation where the cap does not have the same effect on farm incomes anymore. There has been a move from funding production, which led to massive overproduction of certain commodities. It is more market-based now. The output for the country, for agricultural sector, is about 10 billion a year. That's a lot of money. It employs people in every parish, every town's land, in rural communities. It's a natural decentralised process for employment in the country. Put in context, Ireland is currently paying in about 2.5 billion a year into the EU. We are a net contributor now. Our recent sign-up to the PESCO, the European Defence Initiative, Army, is penciled in at about 2 billion. So we are going to be paying far more into Europe than we ever received. And also to put in context, our charity NGO sector in this country has a budget of about spend of about 10.5 billion. 5.5 billion of that is coming directly from the government. So all of these figures dwarf what is coming back to us as in form of subsidies or payments. Now, for Ireland to move to a subsidy-free, a non-interference from the EU and not being dependent on the EU for subsidies, what has to happen is serious tax reform. The best example we can give of a country similar in size and population to ours that experienced this was New Zealand. In 1984, a Labour government, running into a budget crisis, overnight just cancelled all subsidies. Their agricultural industry was heavily subsidised. Most of their produce was going to the UK as a Commonwealth country. Now, when that was scrapped, the papers were filled with scare stories, the country was going to starve, every farmer was going to go out of business, they wouldn't be able to cope. The reality was that about 1% of their farmers, 800 people, left farming within the year. Now, in the time since 1984, New Zealand's agricultural output has increased by 400%. They're now among the most competitive farm produce producers in the world, and they are selling their produce, even with tariffs, cheaper into most countries than we can compete with. The taxation reform that has to happen is, number one, VAT. When subsidies were cancelled, stopped in New Zealand, the first thing they did was VAT on all agricultural inputs, products, was scrapped. So they could buy machinery without VAT, steel without VAT, concrete without VAT. If the government wasn't going to support it, the other side of that coin was they couldn't tax it. And that was a huge spur in the increase in output. There was suddenly a freedom to farm and a freedom from taxation. In Ireland, we have VAT of 23%, as everyone's aware. It was increased from 21% just after the crash, a so-called temporary measure that has not been returned despite our politicians talking about in glowing terms of how our economy is doing. As Milton Friedman once said, there is nothing more permanent than a temporary government measure. So, what have subsidies actually done for Ireland? Well, for a start, they're heavily regulated. Heavy regulation means politicians and lobby groups And P.J. O'Rourke, the American satirist, said, when politicians regulate buying and selling, the first thing to be bought and sold are politicians. So we have created a layer of bureaucracy above ourselves that then feeds into a bigger layer of bureaucracy at European level. The 49% of our beef farmers have off-farm employment. The average income for beef farmers is less than $10,000 a year. It is almost totally dependent on subsidies, despite Ireland being the fourth largest beef exporter in the world, and our beef being universally recognised as the best in the world. It is still not able to return a price sufficient for farmers to be able to survive on that enterprise alone. Sheep farmers have an average income of $17,000, and our tillage farmers, and remember Ireland has some of the highest yields of corn in the world, is $31,000. $24,000 of that $31,000 is in direct payments from the EU. Basically, most of our farming enterprises are completely dependent. But the other aspect of that is that the level of taxation that you pay for your inputs, on your income, on any profit you make, is absolutely crippling.